Hamilton is based on Rod Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton, but the musical does take a few liberties to fit it all into a 3-hour show. The supposed love triangle between Alexander, Elizabeth, and Angelica Schuyler is mostly fictionalized, and we're reasonably sure that the founding fathers of our country didn't rap battle each other, but the show still tells a good story about ambition, legacy, and the personal costs of both. I'm Greg Elliott with Screen Rant, and here are the major changes that Hamilton makes to the real life of Alexander Hamilton.
When I got sort of out of sorts with a buddy of yours, I may have punched him. It's a blur, sir.
You punched the Burr, sir?
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's no evidence that Alexander Hamilton actually punched the bursar of Princeton College. First off, it was still called the College of New Jersey at the time, but this part of Aaron Burr, sir, is just to make a good rhyme. According to the 1834 biography, The Life of Alexander Hamilton, he was accepted to the college in 1772, but had his admission revoked when he tried to pursue an accelerated course of study like Burr had. But there's not actually any written evidence of any of this, but the song is pretty catchy, right?
Warns us in South Carolina, redefining bravery. We'll never be free until we end slavery.
Alexander Hamilton's relationship with slavery is a bit more complicated than is portrayed in the show. He was an abolitionist and one of the founders of the New York Manumission Society, which promoted abolitionist policies and supported enslaved black New Yorkers, and he didn't actually own any slaves himself, but he did, however, trade slaves on behalf of the Schuylers after marrying Elizabeth. So, while it's true that his views were progressive for the time, his hands weren't entirely clean.
Adams fires Hamilton, privately calls him Creole bastard in his dance.
Say what?
The musical says that John Adams fired Alexander Hamilton, but that's not actually the case. Hamilton actually resigned as Treasury Secretary during the Washington administration 2 years before Adams became president. But according to Chernow's book, Adams did indeed refer to Hamilton as a, quote, Creole bastard, and historian Dominic Martin found letters that Adams wrote after Hamilton's death, which described him as a Scottish Creole and the bastard brat of a Scotch peddler.
If I can prove that I never broke the law, do you promise not to tell another soul what you saw?
The play fudges some historical details to put the main characters in events that they weren't actually a part of. For example, Aaron Burr wasn't Charles Lee's second in the duel with John Laurens, and while Alexander Hamilton was confronted about his payments to James Reynolds, it wasn't Thomas Jefferson, Aaron Burr, and James Madison in the room where it happened, but instead future President James Monroe, Virginian Senator Abraham Venable, and Frederick Muhlenberg, the very first Speaker of the House of Representatives. Hamilton gives the impression that the release of the Reynolds pamphlet, combined with the death of his son Philip, led Alexander to retire from the public eye. The song, The Election of 1800, suggests that he was reluctantly dragged back into politics, but for one, Philip didn't die until 1801, so Alexander would not have been grieving at the time of the 1800 election. And while the musical portrays the 1797 publication of the Reynolds pamphlet as ending his career, it skips over the quasi-war with France between 1798 and 1800, where Hamilton was appointed the rank of Major General and straight up led the US Army. And while he did move uptown in 1803, according to Chernow's book, he still commuted between his house and town, a 3-hour round trip, 4 or 5 days a week.
Raise a glass to freedom.
He aims his pistol at the sky.
Hamilton also wasn't killed because of the election of 1800, well, at least not directly. He died 4 years after he helped Jefferson beat Burr to the presidency in 1804 after campaigning on behalf of Morgan Lewis, Aaron Burr's opponent in the New York governor's race. It was only after this second beating due to Hamilton's interference that Burr demanded an apology, which Hamilton didn't give, eventually leading to their famous duel. TV, film, and yes, musicals often add, delete, or stretch things to make things fit for time or just to make them more interesting, and the biggest musical of all time is no exception. So make sure to keep coming back to Screen Rant for more on Hamilton. I'm Greg Elliott, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.